Now, normally, a lot of these videos will be shot either while I'm in my car or out in nature, but for this video in particular, I wanted to be able to give it my full and undivided attention because it is over a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, as well as very important to Xylince Motors as a whole. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about the motto for Xylince Motors, what it means, and give a little bit of background on where it came from. Sharing passions and inspiring wonder has two things that are core to my life of passion and wonder as some of my core values, as well as being the core driving force of Xylince Motors. And that kind of comes off of the statement I'm sure most, if not all of us, have heard growing up of knowledge is power. And while I believe that that statement is 100% true, I don't think that that is entirely complete. Because while it is true that knowledge is power, power is nothing without fuel. You can have the most powerful car ever made, so powerful it can take you from one edge of the universe all the way to the other in the blink of an eye. But without fuel, that vehicle is unusable. It can't be used without something to initiate that power, to give that power the sustenance it needs to do what it was designed to do. And I feel like that is the current state of our education system, to where we're offering our students the opportunity to learn and grow and giving them all the power they need, but we aren't doing as good a job making sure they have that fuel. And that fuel comes from passion and wonder, which is that childlike sense of curiosity that makes you want to ask questions that help you learn. I think creativity is a big part of that too, which is the combination of passion and wonder. I recently was at the zoo with one of my friends, and while we were there, he had his little boy with him, and he was completely fascinated with how everything was new and exciting to his little kid. Every blade of grass was new, every animal was new and exciting, every penny on the ground was new and exciting, and it was just all so stimulating to him. He was so excited, and like everything made his eyes light up. And his dad, my friend, was absolutely loving it. He loved seeing the world through the eyes of his kid. But there's also something about that that is very sad to me. And I couldn't help but stop thinking about what happened to why parents have to live vicariously through their kids. Like, why is it that they don't see things the same way as their kids anymore? What happened between when they were young kids themselves to when they became adults, to where they stopped seeing the world that same way? There was a study done by Dr. George Land, which he discusses in one of his TED Talks, that he did with NASA, to where they were testing to find out how many kids in the world were creative geniuses. So they took a group of kids aged 4 to 5, and they developed a test to see how creative they were and how innovative these kids were. And these 4 and 5-year-old kids, 98% of them tested as creative geniuses. And they were astonished with the results, so they decided in 5 years we'll come back and do it again. So now the kids are 9 or 10, they've had a little bit more chance to grow up and mature. And so they put them back through the same test, but this time only 30% of those kids now tested as creative geniuses. They did it one last time with the kids right before they started high school, and that number had dropped to 12. They've since done that same test on over 1 million adults, and out of the 1 million adults they've tested, only 2% of them test as creative geniuses. So what happens between us being 4 and 5 to us being 24 and 25 to where that same vibrance and curiosity dies out? Sir Ken Robinson says he doesn't think that we grow out of creativity, but we're educated out of it. And in truth, our education system is not designed to inspire creativity. When our education system, or what we consider to be our modern education system, came into development around the 1900s, its purpose was to prepare people for the workforce. So it was training people to be able to function in the real world, which was important, but it was also focusing on mathematics, science, languages, things that they most likely expected people to get jobs in. But those topics don't really fuel creativity like art or dance or music. And those topics, because most of the time there were not very many jobs or it was unlikely for someone to get a job in that field, they tended to be scrutinized. I know as an engineer, we would often hear, or you would hear jokes about art students about how their degree was not difficult or it didn't have any value or they weren't going to be able to get good jobs or support their families or whatever you have. But those topics are the ones that are the most creative fueling. Sir Ken Robinson says in his TED Talk, the modern education system starts by teaching people from the waist up and typically to one side. It focuses more on the logical side, the problem-solving side of the brain, not the creative side. There are two types of learning. There's divergent, which is creative, outside the box thinking, and there is convergent, which is very logical, problem-solving. Most of our school system is designed to focus on the convergent side of thinking, not the divergent side of thinking. And so for people who are more divergent, which are musicians, artists, actors, they struggle more going through school. On that same token though, a lot of people who learn kinesthetically or through movement or through experimentation tend to be more on that divergent side. It might not be in what we consider an artistic way, but it is more on the divergent side. And so they struggle more trying to learn with the convergent teaching style that we often have of memorization, testing by showing your knowledge in this specific way at this specific time. They struggle a lot more in school. And because they're struggling a lot more, they end up believing that they aren't good. We haven't really done a good job teaching people to learn from their mistakes or to make mistakes. I might be dating myself a little bit, but I know growing up, I used to watch a show called The Magic School Bus. And the teacher in that show, Miss Frizzle, would always have her catchphrase of take chances, get messy, make mistakes, and encourage kids to try things they hadn't done before, be willing to make mistakes and learn from them so they could be better off. Once we go to school in real life though, we aren't really given that opportunity. If a student goes and they make an A on the test, they're celebrated. But if they make a C or a D, they're kind of scrutinized or told they just aren't good at that subject, they need to pay attention more, or that they have a learning disability. We're not allowing kids to make those mistakes they need to make to really learn what they're doing. And when they get to the point to where they're so afraid to make mistakes, they don't want to take chances anymore. And so they stop trying to think out of the box because the world has taught them that thinking out of the box is dangerous, that they're taking risks. And those risks only get greater as you go through school. In preschool, middle school, high school, they all have impact. But once you start getting to college, that's when you really start to feel it. Scholarship students lose their scholarship because they made one mistake on a test. People lose the ability to pursue their degree because they made one mistake on a test. These are mistakes a lot of people can't afford to recover from. It's not an, oh no, I have to retake the class. It's a, oh no, I can no longer afford to keep pursuing my education. And because people become so afraid, we're taught to become so afraid of making mistakes, when we go out into the real world, we don't often step out to try new things. If you ask anyone why they haven't tried to start their business or take that chance doing something they're really passionate about or they're really inspired to do, a lot of them will say they're afraid it won't succeed. We've taught people to fear the consequences of failure rather than the growth that comes from it. And while I'm not saying that failure does not come with consequences that can be heavy, especially when you're dealing with topics like engineering or in the medical field when you have people's lives in your hands. Teaching people that mistakes will always have that weight hinders them from being able to do what they really want to do or what they're really capable of. Worst come to worst, we often scrutinize people who are not doing what we deem valued. So if it's not in the mathematics, science, humanities, or becoming a doctor, people who often focus in music, dance, and theater, as I mentioned earlier, are made to feel less than because their subjects aren't the one that people clap for when they graduate summa cum laude. Those people are essentially told that because what they're good at isn't valued the same way as something else is valued at, that they aren't valued the same way as someone else. We are devaluing people because their talents don't align with what we view as most efficient. We celebrate them when they do something great. We love to go to the theaters and watch a fantastic movie. We love to listen to music and dance with our friends, but when those people are developing, we don't give them the same encouragement we give to someone who's in honors mathematics or honors science or got an A+ on their chemistry exam. Instead, we question them and be like, is this really what you want to do with your life? You know that it's going to be a difficult path, that you might not make a lot of money. We're not encouraging them. Sometimes we even do the same thing for people's passions too. I know when I was a kid, one of the things that you would always hear from parents, at least I know I heard it because I'm a nerd. If you can remember the names of all those Pokemon, you should remember all these mathematical formulas or all these states or all these countries or all this what you have you. And while I believe that statement is true, it also has the underlying implication of because you aren't doing this and you're wasting your time with this, you aren't as good as other people are, or it is devaluing of if you aren't able to do this, what's wrong with you? Rather than encouraging them or asking them, because the reason why that kid can remember the names of all the Pokemon so well is because they're passionate about it. They want to be the very best. They want to catch them all. And that's why they spend so much time researching type combinations and move sets and IVs and EVs and where to find rare Pokemon. But rather than encouraging them in that and seeking what that passion can fuel into, we tell them that that same mental capacity should be applied elsewhere. But what we fail to see is that that same kid that spends all their time investigating Pokemon and learning about their habitats and how they work and the history of this Pokemon and watching YouTube videos about why this Pokemon was named this thing or what its name means in different countries or why it was colored a certain way, that's the same kid that will one day be sitting in the living room watching the news channel and see something on the news saying, look at this brand new animal species that has never been seen before. And that kid will look at the animal and think to themselves, that looks a lot like, and then suddenly that love and passion they have for Pokemon now transfers to zoology. And so we are squandering our creativity by giving it a dose of realism when that same creativity will learn to adopt to realism later on. We shouldn't tell people that something that we don't see has value, that it doesn't have value, because a lot of times that can link to something else. So with Xylince Motors trying to share passions and inspire wonder, it's encouraging people to connect with other people that love the same thing they love and to fuel that fire within themselves and fuel the fire within others, because that fire then fuels knowledge. If you're passionate about something, you're going to research it and you're going to grow your knowledge. And the more you grow your knowledge, the more power you have and the more application you can have to other things. And that passion comes from a sense of curiosity. You ask yourself questions for things that you might not know or might not understand. And as you start to learn more and make those connections of things you didn't know before, or seeing, oh, that's why this works this way, or that's why that looks this way, or that's why I heard this, that is what then turns into passion, which then fuels knowledge. The overall statement, because in truth, sharing passions, inspiring wonder, is an abridged version of the core motto of Xylince Motors. Our core motto, and what I believe the full version of knowledge is power, and where that whole context is, if you give it with full context, is that innovation is powered by knowledge. Knowledge is fueled by passion, and passion is inspired by wonder. When you have all those three things, that's when you create something new. Someone had to think up an iPhone. Someone had to think up text messages. Someone had to think up planes. Someone had to think up a telephone or a TV or most of the stuff we use on a daily basis. And if you look at the history of how a lot of this stuff was developed, a lot of it was scrutinized because they didn't think it was possible. But the creators of those things held on to what they believed was possible, and they allowed their curiosity and their creativity to get the better of them, and they were able to produce something that we now use every day. And so for me, sharing passions and inspiring wonder is my whole goal in life, so that I'm encouraging people to continue to pursue what they love and encouraging them to stay curious, to stay asking questions like they do with their kids, so that we then become the parents that don't have to live vicariously through our kids, but we can live with our kids in that same sense of curiosity. So when they see a caterpillar and they are fascinated with it, we see the caterpillar too, with them rather than through them. I hope that some of what was in this video resonated with you guys, and that you start taking more time to really fuel your inner child and grow that passion and fire inside of you to do what it is you love to do. Thank you for your time, and I wish you the best rest of your day. Goodbye.